Hello, everyone, and welcome back to American Ultras Talk. I know it's been a while, and part of that is because the USMNT waited so long to make any sort of announcement regarding this roster or a potential coach, which still hasn't been announced, hearing that it could be on Wednesday. But I'm here a bit today to go over the USMNT roster for the September camp, where we'll be playing friendlies against New Zealand and Canada. Not great opponents, but it's all that we could really get because the rest of the world is playing competitive games elsewhere. So just a couple quick disclaimers before we get into the roster. I think the main one is, of course, Mauricio Pochettino, who was announced a while ago to be our next head coach, still has not been officially announced by the USMNT, and because of that, Mikey Varas, who was the coach for the U20 World Cup last year and has been an assistant coach with the USMNT under Berhalter since, will be the interim for this camp. Now, we're still not completely sure who actually picked the roster. I do think that Pochettino did have some influence on it, but Varas is still the coach for this cycle, so I think it's safe to assume that he had the influence. He was the one calling the players. So without further ado, let's just get into the roster now, and we'll start with the goalkeepers. As you can see here, I pulled it up, the official announcement from US Soccer. We have 4 goalkeepers. It's a 24-man roster, so just your basic 23 plus 1 goalkeeper. Now, in the past, having 4 goalkeepers in a 24-man, one of them was left off the matchday squad. So we will see if that remains the case for this camp. I don't know why it would, since it's friendlies and there shouldn't be any restrictions on how many players there are, but that's just a fair warning. So if you see someone like Diego Kochen left off the matchday squad for some of the friendlies, you'll know why. But speaking of Diego Kochen, he is here alongside Ethan Horvath, Patrick Schulte, and Matt Turner for the goalkeepers. And let's just talk about them one by one. For Matt Turner and Ethan Horvath, I think they kind of fit the same boat. Turner, of course, being a little bit clear of Horvath being the USMNT starter for so long now, just made a loan move to Crystal Palace. He'll be the backup there this season. Horvath is starting for Cardiff City, but so far they look like one of the worst teams in the championship, and he has not looked good himself, probably being one of the worst goalkeepers in all of England, maybe even all of Europe so far to start the season. So both of them have been on a downwards trajectory and have been for a while now. So to be completely honest, I don't see why either of them are here. Maybe having one of them, specifically Turner, be here to kind of help the young guys, integrate them, be a leader, even though I don't think Turner's a great leader in the slightest. Having one of them here makes sense. Having Horvath here, especially since there's 4 keepers, just makes absolutely zero sense to me. The other 2 are better. Patrick Schulte, of course, our starter at the Olympics, a young guy. He's been very good in MLS with the Columbus Crew over the past couple of seasons. It's nice to get him finally integrated into the senior team, alongside, of course, the other guy who I think, personally, is the biggest win on this USMNT roster, Diego Kochen from FC Barcelona, their second team. He's the starter for them. We were a little bit uncertain on what his situation was going to be this season, but he will be starting for their second team hopefully every week. It looks like that will be the case, which is great for his development. Of course, we know how great La Masia is. He's came through the academy. He's now in the professional ranks, playing in the 3rd tier, not the highest of levels, but I think it's safe to say that Kochen is by far our highest potential youngster in the goalkeeper position, and I'm personally very, very happy that he got called up to the USMNT, because Spain has had interest in him for their youth teams. There's also, of course, Venezuela and Peru that he's eligible for that I think have also shown interest. So getting him here, and especially the fact that Barcelona can't reject this, because they have rejected us trying to call him up to the youth teams in the past. They can't do anything about this, so having him here for his first call-up is going to be great for him to experience it. Even if he doesn't play, it's going to be great for him to slowly get integrated into the team, and if he keeps to progress, hopefully he'll be a mainstay in the team. Now, just quickly to mention a couple of goalkeepers who aren't here. Even though there's 4, I think there really should just be 3. Out of the ones here, I'd probably cut Horvath, but there are a couple that I think are worth talking about a little bit that aren't here. To start with, Gabriel Slonina, I think is the one who every single USMNT fan has wanted to see called up. The thing is, and I don't know if this is necessarily the only reason, because if you follow Gaga Slonina on X, or formerly known as Twitter, follow us over there, by the way, you would see that he wasn't exactly too happy about not being in the roster. So I'm led to believe that maybe this wasn't the only reason he wasn't there, but Barnsley, of course, are in League One. That's where he is on loan. League One, and of course the levels below that as well, they don't stop for the international break. They still have games. So Slonina is needed at the club level, so having him not be here for that reason does make sense. As much as it sucks, it does make sense. Now, if he wasn't given a call by Mikey Varas to say that, okay, look, your club needs you, we're not going to call you up for this reason. If he wasn't even given a chance to talk to the manager, that's just not acceptable in my opinion, because I think if they weren't playing, I think he absolutely should have been here and probably been the starter, because he's been so good for Barnsley since joining them on loan, and really I think just deserves a chance to be integrated into the team. The other two that I want to talk about are both MLS guys. One of them, Matt Fries, I don't think he would have been called up. He did just get injured in their last game, actually on Saturday, against the Columbus Crew and against Patrick Schulte, of course. He got injured, which is a shame. I think he's been the best American goalkeeper in MLS this season, better than Schulte, better than Celentano, better than, of course, Zach Steffen, who I'm going to talk about after him. But I think it's just a shame, because even if he wasn't going to get called up, he's been having an incredible season, and I truly think that he would have been one of the goalkeepers I've called up. I think I mentioned that when I did the roster prediction video. I would have personally gone for Fries, Slonina, and Kochen, but of course Fries is injured now, so that's probably one of the reasons why he's not here. And then of course Zach Steffen. I've seen so many fans calling for Zach Steffen to make a return, and even the Colorado Rapids admin on Instagram, I think it was, commented under the USMNT roster announcement saying that Zach Steffen should have been there. It's just so stupid to me, because Zach Steffen has been bad this season for the Rapids. People are only giving him hype because Turner's bad, Horvath is bad, our goalkeeper situation is the worst it's been potentially ever, and Steffen had a couple of good games in Leagues Cup, which, as we all know, is a made-up tournament. It's a cash grab for MLS, so those games shouldn't even really be considered anyway. But outside of that, in MLS, he's been subpar, probably a bottom-half goalkeeper in the whole league. There's players like Schulte, like Celentano, like Friso, of course I mentioned, even like Chris Brady, who I'd much rather call up over Zach Steffen. It's just, I had to throw that out there, because I think I've seen way too many people claiming that Zach Steffen should have been here. Maybe over Horvath, but outside of that, it's really about it. I don't think he has a USMNT future. I hope he doesn't, to be completely honest. Now, moving on to the defenders, and there's 8 of them here. I'll just read off the names quickly. We have Austin Trusty, a center back from Celtic, just signed there from Sheffield United. And by the way, on that topic, just stay tuned for our full transfer update video, a recap of the transfer window. It's going to be a long one. It's going to be a good one. It's going to be coming out pretty soon, so stay tuned for that. It's going to be a fun one. So make sure you have the notifications on if you don't already. Other defenders here, we have Marlon Fossey getting his first USMNT call-up since, I believe, 2019, still uncapped for the national team. He's playing for Standard Liège in Belgium. We have Christopher Lund, the left back, playing for Palermo in Serie B. We have Mark McKenzie, who also just made a move. They spelled the club wrong here on this article, but playing for Toulouse out in Ligue 1, signing for them from Genk, of course. Tim Ream also just made a move. He went to Charlotte FC, coming back home to MLS from Fulham. Chris Richards from Crystal Palace, the other center back. Joe Scally, of course, from Mönchengladbach, our starting right back at the Copa America and probably in this camp as well. And then Caleb Wiley from Strasbourg. Just quickly to address the elephant in the room here, Anthony Robinson, our star left back, probably our second best player, is not here. Mikey Varas did say that's because he's been a little bit banged up recently, and it's better to just let him focus on getting back to full fitness, even though he has been for a while now, and letting him focus on his form with Fulham, which, it has to be said, has been fantastic to start the season. I actually really like this decision, because we know what Jedi is. He's so consistent, probably the most consistent player we have, one of the best left backs in the world. I truly believe that, and I mean, he's already been named a Premier League Team of the Month as the left back there to start the season. So just showing his quality, even at a mid-table club. We know what we have there. We don't know what we have as our other left backs. So having Christopher Lund and Caleb Wiley as the only two here to battle it out for the backup left back spot, I think is actually a really good idea. Hopefully one of them starts one game, the other one starts the other. If they both get 90 minutes under their belt in this camp, I think it'll give us a huge indication on who could potentially be the Jedi backup for the future. Now, I will say John Tolkien, I think, will feel a very hard done by here. If he had made the move to Europe, like Caleb Wiley did, of course, going to Strasbourg via Chelsea. Of course, he's on loan from them, their sister club. I think if Tolkien had made the move to Europe, maybe he would have been considered here. It's very interesting because, of course, Tolkien did start at the Olympics and looked very good in that tournament. Wiley barely got any minutes, but Wiley's the one who makes the USMNT roster, so it just goes to show what making ambitious moves for your career can do for your national team career as well. So John Tolkien, please get out of MLS in January, or you're going to continue to get surpassed by Lund, by Wiley, maybe even by other players as well. I've been huge on Lund for a while. I hope he wins it, but having him compete for Wiley, I think, is a great decision. Now to the right backs, I also really like this. Joe Scally, of course, was going to be here. He's our right back until Dest is back, of course, which should be around early 2025. Marlon Fossey here is an interesting one. There was a couple other options that I could see a case for. You have Brian Reynolds, who's also playing in the Belgian league. He's playing for Westerlo. Westerlo have had a great start to the season. However, their defensive record has not been that good, one of the worst in the league. You have Nathan Harriel, who outside of the last game in the Olympics, who was our starter the whole time and looked pretty good, at least in the group stage. Then you have Richie Ledesma, of course, who's not a right back at all. He's a midfielder, an 8 or a 10, but he has been playing right back for PSV to start the season, has looked pretty solid there. I've seen some people campaigning for him to get a call-up. I'm still in the camp of we need to see more of him, and I think, PSV just signed a right back. Ledesma's not going to be starting from now on, I think it's safe to assume. So I'm glad he's not here, to be completely honest, and I'm glad Fossey is here. If you look at the stats, the deeper analytics, Reynolds is outperforming Fossey in the Belgian league this season, so it's a very fair argument. I would have no problem with seeing Reynolds here, but I think Fossey just brings something a little bit different and a little bit more similar to Dest, and even a little bit more similar to Jedi Robinson as well, even though they play different sides. And the fact that he hasn't been here since 2019, I think he's been flying under the radar for a while now. There's been a kind of a right back crisis outside of Dest and Scally, and with Dest's injuries and in the past his bad club form, obviously that's been fixed now at PSV, but in the past couple of seasons, I think Fossey maybe just hasn't gotten a fair chance yet with the national team in the past few seasons, and it's nice to finally get to see his good form with the club rewarded. Despite the fact that he's been out of the picture for 5 years, anyone can make their way back in with good club form, and I think we'll see that with some of the other inclusions as well. So, love the fullbacks. To have a little summary there. Now for the 4 center backs, I'm also not necessarily a huge fan of the call-ups, but I don't think it's necessarily the worst thing in the world. You have Chris Richards, of course, who was our best center back, I think it's fair to say, although I will say he has not started the season well for Crystal Palace, which could be one to monitor in the coming months, because they did sign 3 center backs in this transfer window, only sold 1, so a spot for Richards if he continues to have bad form. He could lose his starting spot, which is very concerning. But for now, I think it's very clear he's still our best center back. You have Tim Ream here, which I'm a little conflicted on. On one hand, I still don't think he has a national team future for 2026. And if he does, that's kind of a huge problem for our center back pool. On the other hand, I do think he's a good leader to have in the camp to help integrate some of the new guys and help take them under his wing. That being said, we kind of have a lack of young center backs here. The other 2 are Mark McKenzie and Austin Trusty, both Philadelphia Union products. Both have been playing pretty solid, both just made transfers, and I think it's nice to see them both here. However, I think I probably would have rather seen over Trusty because he wasn't a starter at Sheffield United. He made the move to Celtic. Let him get integrated into his new club, like some of the other players that you'll see when we get to the midfielders that were left out, and call up someone like Max Dietz, who was at the Olympics. He didn't really play much center back at the Olympics, granted, but he was there. He was part of the group. We've called up a couple other Olympics guys here, in Schulte and Wiley, of course. And I think Dietz is probably one of our best young center backs right now, so I'd like to see him get a chance. Either him or Noah Kai Banks, because despite, again, not playing at the highest level, kind of like Kochen, I think he's by far our highest potential center back, at least right now. So I honestly wouldn't be opposed to seeing him called up to a USMNT senior camp to see what he can do. The other notable exclusions here are Cameron Carter-Vickers, who is from the Copa America squad. I'm over the moon that he's not here because, to be honest, I have never rated him. I think he might be one of the most overrated players in our pool, one of the worst players by far who's been a USMNT regular over the past couple seasons, and I'm really glad he's not here. Hopefully he doesn't get back into the picture until he at least challenges himself a little bit, because, as I've said so many times, Celtic is not the best opportunity for challenging games against difficult opponents, and I think we could see that concern with Trusty as well now. So I'm not necessarily a huge fan of that move in particular. Miles Robinson and Walker Zimmerman, I think, are the other two notable exclusions. Both were at the Olympics as overage players. Miles Robinson was also in the Copa America squad. Zimmerman was a lot better in the Olympics, as we said, and I wouldn't have been opposed to even seeing him in this camp. However, Tim Ream is here, and I think there's only room for one of them as the older guy, the leader, to help integrate the young guys into the squad. It's good that one of them's there, whether it's Ream or Zimmerman. It doesn't really matter to me. One of them is fine. It doesn't make a whole lot of difference. Ideally, in an ideal world, neither of them are seeing minutes anyway. So the fact that one of them's there, one of them's not, it kind of is what it is. So overall, to kind of summarize for the defender section, the fullbacks are great. The center backs are fine, although I would have liked to see probably Max Dietz over Austin Trusty. Now, moving on to the midfielders, and there are only 6 here, although there's a couple other players in the forwards, well, one in particular that can also play as a midfielder. But we have the number 6, who's probably going to be starting there, Johnny Cardoso from Real Betis. We have Luca de la Torre, the 8 from Celta Vigo, whose club situation is a little bit iffy right now. He just came back from an injury, but it remains to be seen whether he's even in the manager's plans. So a transfer to Eredivisie, since their window is open for another day or two, would probably be ideal, although I don't think it will happen. We have Aidan Morris, the backup 6 here, probably from Middlesbrough. We have Yunus Musa, the 8 from AC Milan, Gio Reyna, the number 10 from Borussia Dortmund, and Malik Tillman, the other number 10 from PSV. Now, for this midfield group, I think it's also worth noting, another quick disclaimer, like Jedi Robinson, Weston McKennie has been rested because he didn't have a preseason with Juve. He's kind of out of their plans. I know officially he's in them, but he hasn't really been playing too much. He's been a backup option off the bench, hasn't been playing in some of the games, limited minutes in others, so it's best for him to just stay at Juventus for this pretty meaningless camp. I think that is the right call. Then, of course, we do have players like Tyler Adams, who's injured, Leonard Maloney, who just got injured over the weekend, also on, I think it was Sunday, actually, that he got injured, which is horrible because I do think, from what I've heard, at least, he was going to be in this roster. Aidan Morris came in as a replacement for him, which is just so unfortunate. It's great for Aidan Morris, but from Maloney's perspective, I think this was his perfect opportunity. With Adams, of course, injured, with Tessman not here, he's another one, kind of like McKennie, who didn't have a preseason with Lyon. He, of course, just made the transfer there, so he's getting integrated into the team. I would like to see him within a USMNT camp soon, hopefully in October, but I think for now, it's a fair call to leave him out, let him get integrated into Lyon and settle in there nicely, so hopefully he can start the season and start his career over in France on a positive note for the next coming month. There's also, on a lesser note, Gianluca Busio, who got injured in the Olympics, is still not back for Venezia. If he was back, I probably would have wanted to see him called over Luca de la Torre, but he's not, so he's not. It's kind of a pointless conversation to even have in the first place. And those are, I think, the main notable omissions from an injury perspective. And then I mentioned Tanner Tessman, of course, who's not here because he's getting settled into France. 2 other players, I hate to pick on Luca de la Torre, but I just don't think he has a place with the USMNT, and especially in a camp like this where I think it should be used to integrate some of the young guys. We see that with Aidan Morris even in this group, and some of the other players in the other position groups as well. I just don't understand why Luca is here over players like Jack McGlynn, who was at the Olympics and showed his skills there, as well as, of course, what he's been doing with the Union and MLS, or Rokas Pukstes, who unfortunately wasn't at the Olympics. It would have been nice to see him there, but has been a locked-in starter for Hajduk Split, just got his first assist of the season there, I think this past weekend, so he's finally getting back into good form with, albeit a rough start to the season. These are 2 high potential youngsters that we have that bring something a little bit different. We know what Luca is now. Realistically, in 2026, I don't see him as an option. I'd much rather have a player here like Tessman, like McGlynn, like Pukstes, like Busio if he wasn't injured, that is a little bit younger, hasn't been with the main USMNT ever, or at least in a while, and could bring something different to the table. Now, in terms of the players that did make it, Cardoso and Morris, I think, are great call-ups. I'm glad that Aidan Morris is here. He's settled into Borough so well, been one of the best players, I dare say, even in the championship. I think he's been one of the best midfielders, so crucial to all the success they've had to start the season. I know there have been a couple bumps along the way, but if you compare it to last season, how they started, it's just a completely different story. And he's been so integral to their plans. And I mean, hopefully they can even push for promotion this season. I think they have the quality to do so. And if they do, Morris, this could be his first of many camps for the USMNT. I know it's not his first USMNT camp, but for this coming cycle for 2026, I hope he does get the chance to start one game, maybe have Johnny start the one against Canada, Morris start the one against New Zealand, which of course is a little bit of an easier opponent and of course not a regional rival, so the stakes are lower even though they're already low because it's a friendly game, not for anything. For the eights, like I said, Luca de la Torre I don't think should be here. Musa being here is great. McKennie not being here is also great because, well, in an ideal world, it would have meant that we could bring in some of the young guys, but of course that's not the case here. Musa is a young guy himself, to be fair. He was Olympic eligible. He's still such a young player, despite being around for so long, already with 39 caps. I think, again, at Milan this season, he still needs to kind of integrate himself a little bit because he is a backup for them, and I think he's going to remain that for the rest of the season, which is a little bit concerning. It would have been nice to see him maybe get a mid-table loan so he could start week in, week out, but he's still got so much potential, such a young player. It's nice to see him in this roster. For the 10s, it's pretty straightforward. It's Reina, it's Tillman. Our 10 position is stacked, and these are our best two. They should be here. I would like to see Malik Tillman given a chance to start at least one of the games. Again, we have basically a backup in every position. Some we even have multiple. The striker, as you'll see, and of course the goalkeepers. I'd like to see basically a completely different 11 in both games to really give all these guys a fair chance because, of course, they're friendlies. They're not really meaningful for anything besides seeing what some guys are about. Now, to move on to the forwards, the final part of this roster. You start with Brendan Aronson, who is a 10 and has been playing there recently for Leeds, but is still included in the forwards list as a winger. You have Fuller and Balogun, the striker from Monaco, who had a great Copa America, I thought, a great summer for the USMNT, but has started the season very poorly at Monaco, which is maybe a cause for concern. Ricardo Pepi, again, has not started the season great in terms of minutes at PSV, although he did already score a goal off the bench, which was nice to see. You have Christian Pulisic, of course, Captain America. Obviously, he's going to be here. No surprises there. Josh Sargent from Norwich City as our third striker. He's been in pretty good form for them, although I will say as a team, their collective performance is a little bit worrying. And then Haji Wright, a striker/winger. I expect, considering the makeup of this roster, he will be a winger since, I mean, let's be real. Pulisic is the only true winger in this team. I already said Brendan Aronson is a number 10. Haji Wright is kind of a striker-winger hybrid. So having Pulisic as the only true winger is very concerning for me, but I do like some of the call-ups that are here. I like having Aronson here. I think having him as a midfielder, again, maybe over Luca de la Torre, would have been a better option, but the fact that he's here, of course, I'm always going to like that. Haji Wright being here as a backup winger, or maybe even a starting winger based on the composition of the roster, I think is a good call. The three strikers, they make sense. They've been the three strikers. They all deserve a chance to fight for the spots on the roster. Now let's just get into why the roster is this way, because of course the lack of wingers, I think, is probably the number one concern I think I have and most fans do have with the 24 players that were called up. Of course, Tim Weah, who's usually our starting right winger, should that change? I think it should, but for now, he's at least our starter, and he is injured. Unfortunately, he did score a banger for Juventus in their season opener, but got injured, had to come off at halftime. He should be back after this international break, so hopefully back for the October camp if he continues to impress for Juve, although I think he's probably going to be a backup now considering some of their signings. But he is injured, and Kevin Paredes, who was very impressive at the Olympics, probably our best attacker, is also injured, unfortunately, which sucks because, I mean, you see the lack of wingers here. This would have been the perfect camp for him to come in, maybe even get a start or two, which would have been huge for him. I'm really upset for him that he's injured, and it's just a wasted opportunity, honestly. Not to say wasted because there's something he could have done about it, but it's just unfortunate. Then, of course, you have Luca Coglioscio, who isn't injured, but he is with Italy's U21s. He still won't make a decision, and, I mean, he has so much time left with their U21 cycle. I don't expect his final decision to come for a while now, unfortunately. Other players that probably could have been considered here: Paxton Aronson, another one like his brother who is a number 10, but has been playing out wide for club and country in the past. We saw it a little bit at the Olympics. We saw it in the past with the other youth teams. And now at Utrecht, he is starting as their left winger. So maybe having him here, I think he probably should have been in the camp in the first place. Another one that probably should have been included is Griffin Yao, of course, another Olympian like Paxton Aronson. Again, the lack of wingers here is just the perfect opportunity to include him. He's not started the season great with Westerlo because he didn't really have a preseason with them like so many of the other Olympians, but I just think that with the lack of wingers here and some of the other players that got called up, it just makes more sense to have a young guy like him who could have a USMNT future for 2026, have someone like that in the roster. It's just a shame that some of these Olympians, I think, weren't given a fair shot for this camp. But overall, I do think that there's a lot of positives that we can take away from this, some negatives as well. But I do think that a lot of the inclusions are justified. It's nice to see some of the younger guys like Kochen, like Schulte, like Wiley, like Aiden Morris come into the team and get a fair chance to take some of the spots of some of the other guys who are injured and underperformed a little bit in the summer. But that's going to do it for this video, guys. Let me know in the comments, what kind of players would you like to see in this roster? Who didn't make it that should have made it? Who made it that shouldn't have made it? And overall, just grade the roster and let me know who you think should start in the first game, because I think there's a lot of different ways we could go. Some players who maybe are getting their first chance with the senior team that are looking to impress and could get some opportunities, much deserved ones, or should we go with the old guys, the main core from Copa America? Just let me know. Make sure to like and subscribe if you enjoy the content, and we'll see you next time.